Alright, fellow trickies and trickers, it's time for the final episode review of the day, which is Hippocratic Oath. Worf sits alone in Quark's, his eyes shift between a pad and a Markalian across the room. When Quark observes the poor quality of the Markalian's mugshot on the pad, Worf is not amused. The Markalian is a known criminal, but Quark claims he does not discriminate, and everyone is welcome at his bar. The Frankie goes over to talk to the Markalian as Major Kira approaches and sits down with Worf. After ordering a Darkalian tea, she agrees with Worf's observation that Quark is likely plotting something with the Markalian, yet she seems unconcerned, reassuring Worf that Odo keeps Quark in check. Worf agrees but adds that Quark is not in prison. Medical Officer's Log, Stardate 49066.5. Chief O'Brien and I have concluded our biosurvey of Merrick 3 in the Gamma Quadrant. We're on course back to the wormhole and should arrive at the station 2 days ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, on the roundabout USS Rubicon, O'Brien and Dr. Bashir are discussing Keiko O'Brien's return to Deep Space Nine after spending several months at Bajor. Keiko's upset that her husband set up a workshop in their bedroom while she was gone, and she thinks it is a subconscious attempt to push her out of his life. Although Miles does not think he has any motive, Bashir claims the opposite is true. Miles' desire to be closer to his wife is the reason, for the bedroom reminds him of her. O'Brien is relieved to hear this and wishes his wife was more like Bashir, though he tries to hide it. The conversation is interrupted when they detect a magneton pulse emanating from a nearby planet, like a result of a damaged warp drive. However, a plasma field prevents the runabout's sensors from scanning the planet. The field causes them to crash into process. The officers emerge to find themselves prisoners of the Jem'Hadar. Uh-oh. On the planet, Bashir and O'Brien are interrogated. The Jem'Hadar can easily read their rank and specialty from just looking at their uniforms. Interestingly, they place value on engineering targets rather than science and medical, revealing a bit about their tactics. One of the Jem'Hadar wants to kill Bashir and use O'Brien for intelligence, but Lee Jem'Hadar disagrees and brings him to the complex. Meanwhile, Worf discusses with Captain Sisko and Odo the Markalian aboard the station how he is likely plotting an illegal activity. Odo doesn't appreciate Worf for attempting to interfere with his duties and assures Captain Sisko that he is already conducting an investigation. Sisko allows Odo to proceed and, while understanding Worf's position and appreciating his vigilance, reminds the Klingon that he is no longer a security officer, but is now the strategic operations officer in charge of coordinating all Starfleet activity in the sector. Worf promises not to let the incident interfere with his duties. On the planet, Bashir and O'Brien are in a holding force field, while discussing the fact that the Jem'Hadar look rather jumpy. Before the conversation can go further, the lead soldier, Goran Agar, comes and takes Bashir to an isolated section of their complex. Bashir is told that he is now working for the Jem'Hadar. Bashir refuses, but is then told of a story that he can't believe. The lead Jem'Hadar has freed himself of his need for Ketracel White. He believes that some aspect of the planet has freed him from his addiction and wants Bashir to find a way for all Jem'Hadar to live without the need for Ketracel White. Bashir is still a little hesitant to help the Jem'Hadar, so he's led to an area where there are several soldiers obviously in withdrawal stages. A slight touch to any of them results in excruciating pain. Upon seeing this, Bashir is once again asked if he will help. He says yes, but only with Chief O'Brien's assistance. The soldiers then receive the white necessary to relieve their symptoms. On the station, following a meeting about the escalating Klingon attacks in the wardroom, Worf tells Odo his investigation has led him to convince Quark is planning to smuggle Tellurian crystals, and is due to meet his buyer that evening. Odo thanks Worf for the information, but is cagey when he asks if he has plans to arrest Quark. O'Brien and Bashir go to work after a couple days. Bashir has run tests, but in the meantime, O'Brien has been working on a makeshift weapon firing a plasma charge to subdue the guard. Quietly, he explains that they will get the guard's gun and run to the runabout. Then, Gornagar and a few others arrive to check on the progress. A second, Arak Taral, picks up the device O'Brien was working on. O'Brien explaining it's for scanner resolution. He inadvertently triggers the weapon. Bashir and O'Brien are quickly subdued, but the second refuses to release his hands from O'Brien's neck. Bashir tends to the guard who was hit by the device. The guard now cannot stand, but Bashir can fix the wound with surgery. Revealing some more about the rules, the injured Jem'Hadar expects to be killed rather than be a burden on the others. Bashir objects, but interestingly, so does Goran Agar. He He says it's one of the Vortis rules, and they won't live by them any longer. Meanwhile, Worf covertly observes Quark waiting for the smuggler from the second floor of the bar. Quark starts suspecting the crystals, and Worf then leaves to confront Odo about the situation, saying he doesn't appear to be addressing the situation at all. Odo brushes him off, saying he doesn't need him interfering in the way he conducts his duties, and angrily suggests that Worf focus on his own. Dr. Bashir comes to the decision that the Jem'Hadar deserve freedom, and feels that, once free of the drug, they may no longer be as murderers and could live peacefully. Despite his research, he was no closer to discovering why the lead Jem'Hadar did not need Ketracel White. Inspecting Gornagar, he finds his body is producing the white itself, but can't explain it. Bashir also mentions the Jem'Hadar child they found and the fact that Odo helped them. Gornagar reveals they almost worship the Founders, but they do not talk to them. Back in the cell with O'Brien, Bashir relates his newfound opinion of the Jem'Hadar, but O'Brien is skeptical. He says they know Federation doctors are trained to feel sympathy, meaning they're manipulating Bashir. Bashir says they should help him, as the effort could end the Dominion. O'Brien is shocked, saying Bashir is just guessing and that the Jem'Hadar are simply killers, without any other purpose in life. At least in the Dominion, they are kept in check. Bashir replies that they are still people. Finally, Bashir ends the conversation by pulling rank and ordering O'Brien to help him remove the runabout's biospectral phase discriminator to assist in his research. With a second watching him, O'Brien removes something from the runabout's floor. In a quick move, O'Brien creates a distraction and transports outside. With tricorder in hand, he's off. Bashir and Gornagar discuss the cure, but Bashir has ruled out all external factors. Gornagar insists there were no anomalous factors from 4 years ago, so Bashir thinks it's simply genetic. The Gornagar was never addicted to the drug in the first place. Then, his second informs them O'Brien escaped. Gornagar orders him to find him and bring him back alive, but he's not convinced Gornagar is weak in believing a lie. He leaves to capture O'Brien, and Gornagar leaves to follow, but for telling Bashir he will not be protected any longer by his men. Bashir gives his word he will not try to escape. Back on the station, Quark is finalizing the deal with the Spire when Worf enters to arrest them. They're both surprised, but then the bad continuing the Latinum turns into Odo. As the deal was actually a sting operation, as Odo planned to be taken aboard the smuggler ship and infiltrate the entire operation. Worf had been interfering in the investigation of a larger plot, and Odo keeps undercover missions to himself. Further, he does report to Worf, and felt his presence actually helped a bit since distracts from Odo's efforts. Odo's first to settle for simply arresting the smuggler and confiscating his merchandise, leaving Worf embarrassed. Meanwhile, O'Brien uses the tricorder to confuse the search party and rigs up a trap for one of them to get a weapon. When O'Brien finally meets up with Bashir to bring him to the runabout, Bashir refuses to leave. Bashir insists that he can find a cure. O'Brien is shocked again and waits to convince him. O'Brien then destroys Bashir's equipment and informs Bashir that charges can be filed against him when they return to DS9. Gornagar finds them and, when there's not enough time for Bashir to start his research from scratch, decides to let them both go free. As they approach the runabout, Alcatraz spots them, but Gornagar shoots him instead. Gornagar sends the officers off on the runabout and returns to his men to ease their withdrawal from Ketracel White, the only way left open to him, by killing them. When O'Brien confirms that he has been a soldier, Gornagar asks him to explain to Bashir. Worf, meanwhile, has a brush kept to Sisko in order to inform about his part in disrupting Odo's investigation. Sisko sympathetic reminds him that things on the station are not always black and white as they might be on a starship, and Quark is definitely a shade of gray. He tells Worf that he'll need time to adjust to the unwritten rules of the station, but is confident that Worf will eventually fit in. As they return to the station, O'Brien apologizes and says that they took the only course of action that would save Bashir's life, while Bashir restates his responsibilities as a doctor and that O'Brien condemned the men to death. They decided to cancel the weekly darts game, but agreed to take it up again in a few days. Aww. So anyway, let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. This is the first episode to use the name Ketracel White, as previously had been described as a missing enzyme in the Abandoned, and simply as a drug to which Jem'Hadar are addicted in the Dice cast. In the later episode To the Death, it established the Jem'Hadar do not eat, sleep, or have sex. But in both this episode and The Abandoned, there are references to Jem'Hadar consuming food. In the earlier episode, the Jem'Hadar child aboard Deep Space Nine says he is hungry and demands to be fed. In this episode, Gornagar claims his men have eaten the same food as me. Iris T. from Bear, with tongue firmly in cheek, explained the slip by saying that Gornagar was being, quote, metaphorically stupid, as Jem'Hadar so often are. This episode marks the first appearance of a runabout belonging to the Danube class of starships. Beginning of this episode, Worf never speaks of Quark by name, merely referred to him as the Ferengi bartender. He continued to make this reference throughout Deep Space Nine's run. Luther Sloan referenced the events of this episode in the sixth season episode Inquisition. Since Shadowplay, O'Brien's rank has been referred to simply as Chief Petty Officer, as identified by Gornagar, rather than the prior Senior Chief Petty Officer. Bashir briefly mentions the events of this episode, The Abandoned, to Gornagar. When O'Brien tells Gornagar that he has been a soldier, he is referring to his service during the Federation-Cardassian War and the Setlik 3 massacre mentioned in The Wounded. Sisko shown briefly tinkering with a clock he constructed while under influence of a Saltana energy sphere in the first season episode Dramatis Personae, near the end, when he is speaking with Worf in his office. There are some parts missing from the clock, and he appears to be tightening something. So overall, I think this episode is okay, and I do kind of feel bad for Bashir because he was just trying to help the Jem'Hadar, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that. So yeah. So overall, I give Hippocratic Oath 4 warp cores out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the next episode, Indiscretion. So until then, live long and prosper, everybody.